Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. Don't forget to like, share this with your friends, and subscribe for more touching stories that I was born Adrian Cole, son of Maxwell Cole, a billionaire who built his empire on digital technologies and global networks. To most people, my name carried weight, like a golden ticket. But to me, it felt like a chain. Everywhere I went, teachers assumed I had access to the best tutors, the best schools, the best everything. What no one knew was that I failed at almost everything I touched academically. Math problems turned into blurred puzzles, essays into blank pages, and history dates into meaningless strings of numbers. My father's expectations hovered like a storm cloud, and each failure only widened the gap between us. He wasn't the type to shout. His silence, the look of cold disappointment in his eyes, hurt worse than any raised voice at AT school. I became the boy everyone either envied or mocked. Classmates whispered that I didn't need to pass because my father's billions would carry me through life. Teachers labeled me lazy, arrogant, and hopeless. They thought I didn't care, but the truth was the opposite. I cared so much it hurt. Every time I stared at a failed paper, shame crawled up my throat, but I pretended it didn't matter. I wore arrogance like a mask because admitting my fear of being worthless would have broken me completely. The place I hid most often was the far corner of the library, not for books, but for the quiet. That's where I first noticed her, Clara Jenkins. To everyone else, she was just the janitor, the woman in faded blue overalls pushing her cleaning cart down the halls, head bowed as if she was invisible. But I noticed details. The way her eyes lingered on the spines of the books as she dusted shelves, the careful precision with which she wiped tables, the soft hum of a tune I didn't recognize. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with streaks of silver in her hair, and skin that carried the stories of hard work and resilience. I didn't know then how much she would change my life. One evening, after another humiliating test score, I lingered in the library long after everyone left. My head was buried in my hands, papers scattered uselessly around me. I didn't hear Clara approach until her voice broke the silence. "You're staring at those words like they're your enemies," she said, her tone calm but firm. I looked up, startled, ready to snap back with some arrogant remark, but something in her steady gaze stopped me. She wasn't mocking me. She wasn't pitying me either. She was simply stating the truth. "You wouldn't understand," I muttered, shoving the paper aside. "I'm supposed to be smart. My dad, everyone expects me to be perfect. But I can't even pass basic tests." My voice cracked in a way I hated. Clara didn't laugh. Instead, she leaned on her mop handle and said, "I understand more than you think. Failing doesn't mean you're stupid. It means you haven't been taught in the way you learn best." Her words hung in the air, strange and almost rebellious, against everything I had been told. Teachers insisted I wasn't trying hard enough. My father insisted I wasn't disciplined. But Clara suggested the problem wasn't me. It was the system around me that I remember staring at her, confused. "What would you know about teaching? You clean floors for a living." The words slipped out, crueler than I intended. Clara's expression didn't harden. Instead, she gave a small, sad smile. "Once upon a time, I was a professor," she said quietly. "But life has a way of stripping titles. Still, knowledge doesn't disappear because of what uniform you wear." That confession shocked me. A professor? The janitor who scrubbed gum from under desks had once lectured in front of students? The idea rattled me, but also stirred something I hadn't felt in a long time: curiosity. She picked up one of my test papers, scanned it, and asked, "Tell me, Adrian, when you read this question, what do you see?" I shrugged, embarrassed. "Just words that don't make sense." Clara nodded slowly. "Then let's make sense of them together. Not for your father. Not for your teachers. For you." That night became the beginning of something unexpected. We didn't sit like teacher and student, more like two people uncovering hidden ground. She didn't spoon-feed me answers. Instead, she asked questions that forced me to think differently. "Why do you believe this? What if the opposite were true? How would you explain this to someone younger than you?" Her method wasn't about memorizing, it was about understanding. And for the first time, I felt a spark. But sparks are dangerous when the world expects you to stay in the dark. I started sneaking into the library at night, meeting Clara under the dim light of desk lamps, my notebooks filling with scribbles that finally began to mean something. She told me one secret over and over. The real test is not what's on paper, but whether you can think without fear. That secret began to rewire my entire mind. Still, nothing came easy. The next exam I sat for, I failed again. But this time, I didn't crumble. I remembered Clara's voice in my head. Failure is feedback, not a final sentence. I went back to her, furious and ashamed, throwing the paper down. She calmly picked it up, circled my mistakes, and said, "Good. Now we know where the holes are. Let's patch them." Word of my late-night sessions with the janitor spread. Some classmates mocked me, calling me the mop boy's apprentice. Teachers rolled their eyes, dismissing the idea that someone like Clara could actually help me. Even my father noticed my late nights and demanded to know what I was wasting my time on. I lied, saying I was just studying harder. The truth felt too fragile to share. As weeks turned into months, something inside me shifted. I stopped hiding behind arrogance. I started listening. Clara wasn't just teaching me subjects. She was teaching me how to face myself. I learned that admitting I didn't know something wasn't a weakness. That humility, paired with persistence, was a form of strength my father's money could never buy. The first time I passed a test, I really passed it. The paper trembled in my hands. It wasn't an A. It was a B-. But to me, it was proof that I wasn't broken beyond repair. Clara smiled when I showed her. "You see? You were never incapable. You just needed to be seen." And in that moment, I realized she was the first person in my life who truly saw me not as Maxwell Cole's son, not as a disappointment, but as Adrian, a boy trying to find his way. But deep down, I knew storms were coming. My father would not stay blind forever, and the school system didn't welcome outsiders reshaping their mold. Still, I held on to Clara's words, clung to them like lifelines. For the first time, I wanted to fight for myself. And that fight was only just beginning. Clara's secret tutoring became my refuge, a quiet rebellion in a world that had already decided who I was supposed to be. By day, I still wore the mask of the careless air, the failure wrapped in wealth. By night, under the dim buzz of library lights, I was stripped bare, forced to wrestle with truths I had long buried. Clara didn't care that my father's name opened doors everywhere else. In her presence, privilege dissolved. All that mattered was effort. She taught me through stories. "When I was your age," she once said, "I believed education was about repeating what teachers wanted to hear. But real knowledge, Adrian, is daring to ask why." She would set a book in front of me, sometimes literature, sometimes philosophy, sometimes even a dusty science text, and instead of asking me to summarize, she asked, "What do you feel when you read this?" At first, the question frustrated me. Feelings weren't graded on tests. But slowly, I learned to connect ideas to emotions, to see patterns where I once saw only walls. The biggest breakthrough came when she showed me how to break problems into pieces. She'd place a math problem on a page and cover half of it with her hand. "Stop staring at the whole mountain," she whispered. "Climb the hill in front of you. Then the next. Then the next." It was such a simple trick, but it shifted everything. For the first time, equations didn't feel like enemies. They felt like puzzles waiting for patience. Of course, our sessions didn't stay secret forever. One night, while I scribbled notes furiously as Clara challenged me to rewrite a passage in my own words, the library door creaked open. It was Mr. Dawson, my history teacher. His brows shot up when he saw me hunched over a desk with the janitor beside me. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice sharp. Before I could stammer an excuse, Clara straightened. "He's studying," she said evenly. "With you?" Dawson scoffed. "This is highly inappropriate. You're a janitor, not a tutor. You shouldn't even be here after hours." I felt heat rise in my chest. For the first time, I wanted to defend myself not just against him, but against the whole weight of assumptions pressing on me. "She's helping me," I said, louder than I meant. "More than you ever have." The silence that followed was thick. Dawson shook his head in disgust and stormed out. Clara sighed, her shoulders heavy, but when she looked at me, her eyes shone with pride. "That was brave," she murmured. "Never let anyone tell you who has the right to teach or who has the right to learn." That encounter made everything riskier. Teachers began watching me more closely, whispering in the hallways. My father's assistant called me into the office one afternoon, saying my father had heard troubling rumors. When I faced him that evening in our mansion, his expression was as cold as marble. A janitor, Adrian? Of all people, you choose a janitor to guide you. His voice was low but full of contempt. She's not just a janitor. I snapped, surprising even myself. She used to be a professor. She's the only one who's ever believed I can actually learn. My father's jaw tightened. Belief doesn't pass exams. Belief doesn't build companies. You're wasting your time. That night, I went back to the library, furious and broken. Clara listened quietly as I spilled everything, my father's words echoing like poison. Finally, she said, "Your father built an empire on machines. But you, Adrian, you're building yourself. That's harder and far more important." Her faith in me was like oxygen. With every session, I grew stronger, not just academically, but as a person. She introduced me to authors who challenged power structures, to scientists who failed hundreds of times before breakthroughs, to activists who refused to be silenced. It wasn't just tutoring, it was awakening. Others began to notice changes in me. Classmates who once mocked me grew curious when my grades slowly climbed. A few approached me, shy and hesitant, asking how I was doing it. I hesitated at first, but Clara encouraged me. "Share what you've learned," she said. "Knowledge grows when it's given away." So, late at night, a small group of us gathered in the library's shadowy corners. Clara guided us all, but she never lectured. Instead, she asked questions that pulled answers out of us like threads from hidden fabric. The group grew students who had been overlooked, dismissed as failures, misfits, or invisible. Under Clara's guidance, we became something more, a community, but the larger our group became, the more dangerous it was. The administration eventually caught wind of the janitor's study circle. One morning, the principal called me into his office. His smile was thin, his words sharp. "Adrian, you're free to study as you please, but this association is inappropriate. Ms. Jenkins has been warned. If it continues, she'll lose her job." I left his office with a heavy heart, guilt pressing down like stone. Clara, however, remained calm when I told her. "I've lost jobs before," she said softly. "But I won't stop teaching. And neither should you stop learning." Her resilience inspired me, but it also terrified me. What if I cost her everything? Yet she seemed unafraid, almost as if teaching us was worth any consequence. The final straw came during midterms. I scored higher than I ever had in history and literature solid A's. My classmates congratulated me, but whispers spread like wildfire. The janitor must have cheated for me. The administration launched an investigation. My father was summoned, his reputation on the line. I'll never forget the way he looked at me in that meeting, half ashamed, half enraged. When Clara was called in, she stood tall in her blue overalls, dignity radiating from her. "I didn't give him answers," she declared firmly. "I gave him tools. If that's a crime, then yes, I'm guilty." The board voted to terminate her. Just like that, the woman who had given me back my mind was dismissed as if she were trash. That night, our study group met anyway. Clara sat with us one last time, her voice steady though her eyes glistened. "They can take away my job," she said, "but they can't take away what we've built here. Remember the secret, the real test is not on paper. It's whether you can think without fear." Her words carved themselves into me. As she left the library for the last time, mop bucket trailing behind her, I realized something had shifted permanently. She was gone from the building, but not from us. Not from me. And that's when I knew. The boy who once wore arrogance like armor was gone. In his place stood someone willing to fight not just for myself, but for the woman who had believed in me when no one else dared. The day Clara was forced out of the school felt like a funeral. I walked the halls, each polished floor tile gleaming with the evidence of her care, each window spotless from her hands. Yet the woman who had given those halls meaning was gone, erased as if she had never mattered. To most people, she was just a janitor dismissed without scandal. To me, she was the only reason I was standing taller, the only reason I believed I could rise above the shadow of my father's name. For weeks, I carried her lessons like a secret flame, guarding it even as others tried to snuff it out. Teachers eyed me with suspicion, but my test scores spoke louder than their doubts. My classmates who had once mocked me now sought me quietly, whispering in corners for help with essays or questions they didn't dare ask in class. I passed on Clara's methods, asking why, breaking problems into pieces, daring to connect lessons to feelings. And every time I guided someone through, I felt her presence beside me, as if she were smiling just beyond the light. But my father wasn't impressed. When my grades improved, he accused me of manipulating the system. "You're not clever, Adrian, you're cunning," he said bitterly over dinner, the silverware clinking in the cavernous silence of our mansion. "You think this janitor-turned-savior has made you into a scholar? You're still a disappointment." His words cut, but they no longer shattered me. For the first time, I met his gaze without flinching. "I don't need to be your version of success," I said quietly. He froze, shocked, as if the boy he'd dismissed as weak had grown teeth overnight. That moment defined the line between us. I still longed for his approval, but I no longer needed it to stand. The turning point came at the end of year assembly, when the headmaster asked me to deliver a speech on academic perseverance. The irony was not lost on anyone. The billionaire's son who had failed every test was now to speak about resilience. As I stood backstage, my palms sweating, I felt the old fear creep in. Then I remembered Clara's voice. "The real test is not on paper. It's whether you can think without fear." I walked onto the stage, the lights blinding, the sea of students and parents murmuring below. I took a breath, and instead of reciting the sanitized draft the administration had approved, I spoke my truth. "I am not here because I suddenly became a genius," I began. The crowd shifted, curious. "I am here because someone believed I was worth teaching. Not a teacher, not a principal, not my father, but the janitor of this very school, Clara Jenkins." She didn't hand me answers. She showed me how to fight for understanding, how to fail and still rise. Without her, I would still be drowning in expectations I could never meet. Gasps rippled through the room. Teachers stiffened, administrators exchanged nervous glances, and I saw my father's face tighten like stone. But I pressed on. "This school teaches us facts, but she taught me humanity. She taught me that learning isn't about grades, it's about courage. If we can't honor that kind of teaching, then what are we really learning here?" By the time I finished, silence blanketed the auditorium. Then, slowly, applause began, hesitant at first, then thunderous. Students cheered, parents stood, and for the first time, I felt the weight of my words ripple outward, bigger than me. My father did not clap. He left the hall before the applause died. But I didn't chase after him. For once, I wasn't performing. For him, in the days that followed, something remarkable happened. Students rallied together, demanding Clara's reinstatement. Petitions spread across the city, parents called the school board, and even local news stations picked up the story of the janitor who had changed lives. Though the administration refused to give her back the job, the movement didn't die. Instead, it grew. That summer, I took money from my trust fund, money my father had intended for frivolous luxuries, and poured it into a dream that had been forming since the night Clara left. With her reluctant blessing, I opened the Evelyn Institute, named after her middle name, Evelyn, which she confessed only after much persuasion. It wasn't a school in the traditional sense. It was a place where learning was stripped of fear, where students who had been dismissed elsewhere could find their voice. Clara became its first director, her blue overalls exchanged for the respect she had always deserved. My father called it foolish. "You're wasting resources on charity," he sneered during one of our rare encounters. But I no longer saw his contempt as law. I saw it as the prison he had built for himself, a prison I refused to inherit. The institute thrived. We began with a handful of students, each carrying the scars of failure, rejection, or invisibility. Under Clara's guidance, they bloomed. I watched shy kids argue passionately about history, struggling readers fall in love with books, and math-phobic students solve equations with confidence. Their triumphs felt larger than any empire my father had built. One evening, after a long day of classes, I found Clara sitting in her office surrounded by stacks of notebooks. She looked up at me, eyes shimmering. "You've given me back my life, Adrian," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, you gave me mine first." Years later, the Evelyn Institute became a beacon, a model studied by educators across the country. My father and I reconciled in fragments, awkward dinners, stilted conversations, the occasional flicker of pride in his eyes. He never admitted he was wrong, But he came to the Institute's opening of a new wing, standing quietly in the back as Clara cut the ribbon. That was enough. Looking back, I realized my story was never about failure or even success. It was about being seen, about how one woman, dismissed by the world, looked at me and chose to believe I was more than my last name, more than my failures. And in doing so, she rewrote my life. So to anyone listening right now, remember this. Your worth is not tied to grades, to wealth, to what others expect of you. Your worth is in your willingness to keep learning, to keep fighting, to keep believing even when the world writes you off. And to every unseen teacher, mentor, or quiet believer out there, your impact may never make headlines, but you may be changing someone's universe. Moral lesson. Friends, if this story touched you, hold on to its lesson. Success is not measured in wealth or flawless scores. It is measured in the courage to rise again after falling, and in the grace to see others not for their titles, but for their humanity. Adrian's journey shows us that one voice of belief, even from the most unexpected place, can awaken a light that no system, no doubt, no dismissal can extinguish. Clara's janitor's cart may have been seen as ordinary, but within her walked extraordinary wisdom, proving that greatness often hides in plain sight. May we learn to value people not by what they wear, but by the hope and strength they offer. May we remember that privilege without purpose is emptiness, but humility with persistence is transformation. If you've ever felt unseen, know that your story is still being written. And if you've ever doubted your impact, know that someone, somewhere, carries your words like a seed in their heart. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and comment below with what this story has taught you today.